Hey guys, my name is Matsumo, and today I'm excited to say that old Rainbow Six Siege is back. Now you might be thinking to yourself, wait a second, what does that even mean? What is old Rainbow Six Siege? Well, Ubisoft just released a limited time game mode called Legacy that tries to capture what Siege was like 5 years ago when the game released. They just celebrated their 5-year anniversary. And so this includes only the base 20 operators, no DLC characters whatsoever. They also try to capture the spirits of those operators, like what they were at launch. So Bandit, Jaeger, Ash all have ACOGs once again, which is terrifying, and it only is on the old version of House, Hereford, and Plain. Now, what's exciting about all of this, at least for me, is that this has been something the community has been requesting for a very long time now. I feel like players have been slowly drifting away from Siege lately. Either it's just because they're getting burnt out, or they want to see a return to what the game was like at launch, or at least something similar. The game, without question, has gotten bigger and bigger over the years. It's kind of getting bloated with a lot of operators, things are much more complex, and so people wanted to go back to a time where things were much more simplistic. And so to have a mode like this obviously is going to appeal to that player base. Now, the real question is though, did Ubisoft succeed here, and is the mode any fun? And the answer is sort of. So Ubisoft clearly tried to make this as one-for-one as possible like it was back in the day, but they had to make some compromises. For example, CanCan's gadget doesn't have a one-shot potential. If you weren't here when Siege released, his gadget actually could evaporate and eliminate one player from the game if they ran through his trap. But they were also much more obvious back then as well. There was literally a red laser beam across the doorway, making it very noticeable. This is one of the reasons why he got the rework, because no one was falling for his trap once people got comfortable with it. And so that rework is still in place. They haven't reverse engineered to where he was at launch. This is true for every single one of the characters. If there was a rework like Tachanka, he doesn't have his turret, which I know some people are going to be disappointed by. But for things like attachments, that is where Ubisoft tried to bring back some of that magic. For instance, Jaeger, Bandit, and Ash mains are going to be thrilled that you can now use the ACOG. And it's just as terrifying as you guys remember, if not more so. But the weird thing about it is that they didn't apply this to every single one of the old operators. For some random reason, Thatcher, Sledge, Thermite, Doc, and Rook, who all had access to that attachment, for some reason don't on this mode, and then characters like Pulse and Castle do have an ACOG. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. The SMG-11 also doesn't have access to this attachment. Like, that was one of the most popular and iconic weapons back then because its ability to snipe people at a distance. Like, it was incredibly good. And so I know a lot of people are disappointed with this mode because Ubisoft clearly tried to bring back this nostalgia, but then they fell short by just not having the right attachments on the right characters. Like, it just feels like it would have been very easy to get that right, but they didn't for some reason. Now, one thing I did appreciate about this mode so far, though, was to see how far some of these operators have come. For example, IQ is awful. Not because she has bad weapons, but because her gadget provides almost no utility whatsoever for the offensive team. There isn't Valkyrie cameras that you have to take care of, Mozzie drones hidden around the map, or Ella and Legion gadgets. All you can really find is like a mute or bandit battery. That's it. Like, she was awful. I distinctly remember people constantly talking about how underpowered IQ was at launch, and they made some adjustments here and there, like they gave her nades, but slowly and slowly, as they started introducing more characters, her influence and her power increased steadily every single update, now to the point where she's one of the stronger operators in the game. I also found Castle oddly effective here. Now, that could probably just because he's able to use an ACOG, and to my knowledge, he never had access to this attachment, but boy, does it make a world of a difference. His weapon, I think, is one of my least favorite in the game, but you give him that attachment and it goes completely in the opposite direction. It is so much fun to use, but I also think it's because he just doesn't have as many counters. Yes, there obviously is Sledge and Ash, that's still there, but you don't have Zofia to contend with. She's one of the more popular characters in the game, Maverick and things like that. And so I just found him oddly a lot of fun to play, probably trouble because of that attachment, but also he felt like he was doing his job, especially on maps like Plane, where you could really slow down their progress. One thing that was a bit of a pleasant surprise with this mode is how much I rely on certain secondary gadgets like the Impact Nade and Claymore. They are not in this mode. They were introduced during Year 1, Season 3 with the introduction of Capitao and Cav. I still distinctly remember when the Impact Nade was released, where everyone for the first couple of weeks thought it was just going to be like the Nade, but on defense. And so for a while, everyone was just throwing this at offense, assuming that it was going to do enough damage to one-shot or just take them out. And lo and behold, that was not a viable tactic whatsoever. And so as time went on, people quickly discovered that no, this is a way to make rotation holes and change the site destruction. I feel like this was a pretty pivotal moment in Rainbow Six Siege history, because after this, they really started to lean into that kind of destruction. Buck and Sledge, for example, got big buffs that allowed them to open up walls and lines of sight more reliably. They introduced a lot of new characters that have that kind of destruction, and I think in the long run, that has greatly benefited the game. It's one of the things that makes this game so unique. And so to go back to a time where you just never had impact nades really changes the way you look at some of these maps and these objectives. You aren't able to open up that rotation hole quickly. You have to use that shoddy to open on up at the start of the round, because you're not going to be able to do it in the middle of a round. You're way less flexible and versatile, and so it was kind of cool to go back and see more of that simplistic time. Now, you might be thinking to yourself at this point, okay, all of this sounds great. I love a good dose of nostalgia, but what does it play like? Is it any good? Does it play like Year 1? And the answer is not really. Rainbow Six Siege has evolved with new maps and operators, but the player base has also evolved along with it, and they've optimized the gameplay almost entirely. If you go back and watch old videos, you'll notice that people make the weirdest mistakes. They're just out in the open, in the middle of a hallway, watching an angle. They're not ducked behind cover or anything like that. They're just literally in the middle of a hallway. That was just the way that people played, because they didn't know what the meta was, because there really wasn't a meta. Now you have crouch lean spamming. Drop shotting was available back then, but no one was drop shotting because it just wasn't a part of the game. People took it much more slowly and tactical. That is one thing that I really miss about old Rainbow Six Siege, is that slower paced gameplay. And if you're expecting it here, once again, you are going to be disappointed. It does happen, don't get me wrong. I had a couple of moments where me and my team were able to methodically move from one side of the plane over to the other, taking out targets as we went, and it was so cool when it occurred, because it really did remind me of that more old school Rainbow Six Siege, but those moments happened few and far between. The player base has really optimized the movement and the gameplay mechanics to the point where we're never really going to be able to get that magic back, because the game has just evolved from that point, and we kind of have to come to terms with that. Now, one thing I definitely don't miss, though, is the amount of spawn peeking that happened on these maps. Now, this could have been exasperated by the fact that, as I mentioned earlier, many of the offensive operators just don't have access to those higher optics, and so it can kind of be harder to see where they're peeking from. Defense all have ACOGs essentially, but offense really doesn't, and so it's hard to kind of retaliate. But holy cow, you really have to spend like the first 30 seconds just slowly moving up to the building, because someone's gonna run out, they're gonna peek from a window, and there's all these different angles. It's really made me appreciate, at least in this respect, their new map design and the reworks of old content, because it's not something you have to think about as much. Like, yeah, you still need to be worried about an occasional person running out, but it's way less viable, and there's not as many angles. And so to go back and play on old house, or something on plane in particular, where bandits and Jaegers are just running all over the place, constantly peeking, that was definitely one thing that I did not miss. Overall, though, even though I do have a couple issues here and there, I have enjoyed my time with this mode. It has been a bit of a trip down memory lane. I'm hopeful that in the near future, they do try to tweak a couple of the aspects, mainly giving the right operators the right attachments. That would be a step in the right direction. I think that would give us a better representation of what the game was like at launch, but just overall, once you get past a couple of those issues, it's just a good time. Play with friends, just enjoy it. Don't take it seriously. I feel like some people are taking this way too seriously, but once you kind of step back, it can be quite enjoyable. But yeah, guys, that is it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed. Let me know what you guys have thought about this legacy mode. Have you been enjoying it? Would you like to see this return to the game continuously? Is this your preferred way to play Rainbow Six Siege? Give me your guys' thoughts down below. But yeah, guys, until next time, have a good one and take it easy.